Okay, good evening. I'm going to call the Board of Finance to order tonight. Joining us is Gary Anino, Winona Ryder, Amy Friend, and what did I say?
Not quite, but kind of.
Oh, I'm just gonna go with I got that out of the way, and I hopefully won't have any more chairman gaffes. Sorry, Winona. I can't see it. Winona Burdine. Sorry. Amy Friend and Carl Johnson and myself, Sarah Nelson. We have a couple absentees tonight, so we're gonna seat Amy Friend and Winona Ryder, our alternate.
Get it stuck in your mind now.
Happy
Winona
birthday.
Burdine as our alternates. We're gonna seat them as voting members tonight. All right. I'm glad this is recorded on YouTube. Everyone will get a laugh. Okay, that's the call to order. First on the agenda is public comments. Oh, yes, please, because they won't hear you unless you're on the microphone.
And speaking of which, it's our turn this time. You guys are gonna have to put the mics next to your mouth because it's really hard to hear you.
Can you hear me?
And
Can you
now,
hear me?
yep,
Okay. Is this for any public comment or
Yeah.
just on stuff that's not on the agenda otherwise, like in some town meetings or?
Nope, you can comment on anything.
Okay, number one, your agenda, I tried reading the agenda at home and like, if you aren't familiar with all this stuff, you have no idea, like a sentence on any of these would be very helpful to just know a little more about it. I wanted to comment about the funds requests, the ARPA and the Connecticut Deep.
Yes, sorry, could you just say your name and
Sorry, Vilma Gregoropoulos. I live at 114 YS of Lake.
Thank you, Bill.
Sorry. Yes, so, having no idea, where you're going with this, but having looked up a little bit about it, I would like to see, I know that the funding can be used for affordable housing and the deep funding for climate resiliency. So in both of those, answering to both of those things, I think one, we should be asking for money and spending it to take the Winterjog Hill property and making it into maybe 5 large lot units. Because there are a lot of kids, I'm old, like 30-year-old kids that want to live in town and farm, and there's no way to get into that. There's no way that's ever going to be affordable unless the town does it. And you're looking at the end of our town as a rural town if that's not an option for anyone. And I know couples that are looking for places and there's just nothing. So I would love to see you guys really look at if there's a money available or the way to make that happen. That's a big piece of property. It could be, a 5-acre piece is not bad for boutique farming if it's decent acreage. And I think that's a pretty big piece of property. So anyway, and then the deep thing for climate resiliency, we should be spending money to conserve as much property as we can around our most important, biospheres or whatever, which is our lakes and wetlands. And we have a couple of open space groups in town, such as Avalonia and the North Stonington Land Alliance, who could be charged with maintaining or whatever. But I think we should look at that. This money, it's here for this. I would hope that's what you're thinking about. That's my comment.
Oh, thank you very much. Bob, did you have a comment?
So Roma, I just want to give you some background
Thank you.
because it is kind of vague on the Board of Finance
Yeah.
agenda. 2 things on the Winterjog Hill property. There's a meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock with planning and zoning because we had somebody that grew up there wanted to buy the property. And so we had to do an 828, send it to the Board of Planning and Zoning so they can look at the property and see if it makes sense for the town to sell it or not. So that'll be discussed tomorrow at their meeting again at 7. Secondly, on this particular ARPA funding, and the plan is for, the state's come out with, funds on, flood mitigation. And we
Right.
know, if you look back in 2010, the kind of flood problems we had here. And because this area right here along the village, all the way through Kingswood, Meadowwood, and this Route 2 corridor is in the floodplain.
Right.
So because this money could be available, if we write a really good grant and at least get enough money, and there's zero match at this point, get enough money to pay for a plan to come up, so we'd be shovel ready when more money comes available down the road. At least we'd have a step ahead of everyone else. So that's what this is on the agenda tonight. So it's just strictly flood mitigation at this point. That's what the grant is for.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying. There's other things. Now, we've got letters of support from 4 people now, with 2 others still coming. Avallone's going to give us a letter of support.
Yeah.
Joe Courtney's office is going to give a letter. But right now I have letters from Heather Summers, Greg Howard, the Wheeler Library, and the Council of Governments, all supporting our efforts to get this grant. So, but it's, again, this is flood mitigation money at this
Right.
point, and we're hoping that, so we don't have another 2010.
Right.
Where so many of the people that are on the Chinook and the Ascot and the other rivers in town, there was so much damage done to both businesses and homes. And that's really what that's for tonight.
Okay, so I guess my comment would be, maybe looking to see if there's other money we could use to do what I had mentioned, which is
Yeah, and
to
there's-
preserve around our.
Seems like money's coming out left and right on some things. It's just a matter of
seems like it.
identifying how to get it, how much of a town match there is. Like
Right.
when we did the steep grant recently, but, and that was for road, we did it for roads,
Right.
parking lot. That was a 20% match, so the town could justify that because we got almost $400,000 for money from the state. This is a 0% match on at least
Right.
this part of it. So down the road, there may be a higher match than 0, it could be 10 or 20, we don't know what it is, but at least we'll be in a position to say, yes, we want it or not, and be shovel ready for a project. And that's what we hope to be.
Okay. Could I just say that regarding the affordable housing thing, I think it's a real mistake to just sell the land to some guy who has enough money to buy it, because that is that's the problem. And we own the land. It shouldn't be a big expense for the town to subdivide it into smaller things and make them affordable. Have them deed restricted and go to people who want to do some kind of farming or.
So how that process will work is, so we as a Board of Selectmen did not vote in favor of selling the land or not. We voted to send it to the Board of the Planning and Zoning Commission to have them look at it.
Right,
And then if they decide that the town does not need that land, that we could sell it, then it still has to go for an RFP, then it has to go to a town meeting, and it has to go to possibly a referendum. So there's a lot of hurdles it would have to
Right.
climb before we get to that point.
okay. So I guess the first one could be the Board of Finance saying that it's not a good.
Planning and zoning. And that-
No, here, you guys aren't planning and zoning. You could come out of this meeting and say, you know what, we don't think that's a good idea. There are things we could do with that.
So the Board of Finance doesn't have anything to do with that particular item right now. That's
So-
not on our agenda.
Okay, I'm looking at your agenda, Board of Finance meeting, and here it is, item number 3. And this is what's confusing about this. It's not a Board of Finance.
Yeah, no,
meeting, or-
this agenda item is specifically about, you're right. It's specifically about the grant related that the Board of Selectmen is bringing to us. So that,
Okay, so it's
just
about a
about-
specific one, not
Yes.
anything that might come out of it.
correct,
Okay.
yeah, but,
Okay, so that maybe next time you do an agenda, be a little more specific.
thank you
If
for
you
the
would, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your comments. I just want to acknowledge that Mike Anderson arrived at 7:07. Thank you.
Sarah,
Yes.
noting that the number 3 is going to be late, and make a motion that we move it to a little further down the agenda.
Can you wait 1 second? Sorry, Carl. So do I need to turn this over to Mike since he walked in? Yeah, okay. So Mike's gonna chair going forward. But Mike, we have a letter that we need to read into public comments. Would you like me to read that? Okay. All right, this is a email from Priscilla Lewis regarding the ARPA fund request Tonight, the agenda includes a grant writer who works in Rhode Island but lives in North Stonington for $7,000 in ARPA funds to write a CT Deep Resiliency Grant. No match. I listened twice to her Selectman YouTube presentation and not certain if I'm accurate in what I interpreted. I gather there's no guarantee of future funds available or if North Stonington would qualify, if any. I mentioned future grant studies requiring more North Stonington money for what? And no guarantee for approvals. The presentation discussed in the village area floods, economics, FEMA studies, and climate change. After the 100-year storm flood of 2010, when the bridge and dam were rebuilt, weren't there studies done? I think the FEMA maps were updated at that time. The town still has needs for ARPA money that could be used and save the taxpayers' money. Leftover money from projects could be used for bigger projects. Although this grant request may have a good future cause, I feel until more of the projects we need done in town are complete, we should not be giving the ARPA money away. Fixing the tunnel, creating better parking for access to the ED building, update things at the town hall, a senior van, improvement to the education building, plus others are a few that this and other ARPA money could be used for to save the taxpayers' money. I felt there were too many unknowns in this request and the taxpayers could use the ARPA funds for their other town needs. I am sending this message as I'm uncertain if I can attend tonight's meeting. Thank you, Pat Priscilla Lewis. Okay.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Brett Mastriani?
Brett Mastriani. I hope that you look at this proposal and approve it as sent over by the Board of Selectmen. I think this has a lot of potential as we look at, and I know Bob's going to go into it more, but as we look at what happened in the past with flooding of the village and the setbacks that put on the town, this is something to help mitigate those in the future. Hopefully, there's more grant money after this program, but one of the things I said during our selectmen's meeting, I don't know if you guys got to watch it, but when I went to our sector meeting at the end of last year, one of the presentations from the state was making sure that we have everything in line to go after, use certain grant money or certain town funds to be ready to go for other grant money. And you have to have these programs ready and you can piggyback them off each other. So then the town doesn't ultimately foot the big bill. They're only footing a small bill to get them prepared for the rest of the grant money as they roll in. So I'm hoping that by approving something like this, we are prepared to move forward with a resiliency plan that can then make a real impact to our town in the flooding that we have seen over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett.
You have an online hand from Brian Rathman.
He's recognized. Brian?
Yeah, on the subject of the ARPA funds, I understand they're for projects for North Stonington. And it seems like that Connecticut Deep, I don't know how to pronounce that word, resiliency program grant. That's a Connecticut program for the state. And I'm just concerned that it's gonna, they can come back and say, oh, maybe you're gonna need sewers. And I really don't wanna I don't wanna pay for any sewers, I'll tell you that, or water going through our town. We got natural aquifers that go through our town. And anyways, it's the ARPA funds. We got projects coming up in North Stonington that I know we're gonna have money for. And that money should be saved so we can use it toward those projects that are upcoming for North Stonington. Thank you.
Brian, just so you know, so for later, I believe Bob's going to go over this particular agenda item in further detail. There's another public comments at the end, Brian. If you have further questions after that, feel free to chime in, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right.
I'd like to make a motion to move number 3 further down in the items until the lady who arrives is supposed to be presenting us to us.
All right. Have a second for that?
I second it.
Any other further discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're gonna move that down. To at least numbers after number 6. For now. On to, budget item number 4, is there a specific transfer request? Nope. Go ahead.
Yes, there is. Thank you. So as you probably remember, we ordered windows for the 1750 house, John Dean Gallup House, which is in Hewitt Farm. We decided not to go with the monies that were recommended by the state that a 50% match. It would have cost the town 200,000 and we would have got 200,000. But we can only do so much work at a time. So we decided as the Board of Selectmen to go out and do this, put new windows in that were correct as far as those times. They're gonna just two divided light grills and they're gonna look nice and they're gonna be energy efficient. And if we're gonna have a tenant living there, you have to have something better than what's there now. So when you drive by, when these windows are installed, they're gonna be beautiful new windows that look like very colonial. We're using the same grill patterns that are in the house now. So we had about $53,000 left in this budgeted item. To not only have the windows and buy the windows, but to have the windows installed. And we went out to an RFP. Words with P. Well, it's an RFP. And anyway, we got no takers. It was out there for 3 weeks. Nobody wanted to put the windows in either. I guess they're all too busy. So then I did is I asked 4 local builders in town, because the windows are coming in now. And I'd like to get them in before the winter. And I called and spoke to Amy's husband, Friend Builders. I spoke to Shamrock Builders. I spoke to Steve Bossy. And I sent in a copy of the RFP to one of our teachers in school. Her husband's a local contractor in town. He did not get back to me. Amy's husband, Brady, said, I'm just too busy. And then Steve Bossy said, maybe I could do it in the spring. Actually, I even asked unofficially, I asked John Varus, and John Varus said he couldn't do it either. But luckily Shamrock could do it. Shamrock Builders is Bill Corrigan. He lives on Wyosset Road, and he could get started as early as next week. So we got his bid on the windows. And when you put the windows, which were roughly $26,000 in his bid, I'll give you the exact numbers. Windows were $25,991. And the bid to put the windows in, including exterior trim, make sure all the openings are correct, interior trim, weather stripping, cleanup, came to $34,800. When you add those two numbers together, we're about $7,100 short. The fact that we put the RFP out quite a while ago, and with inflation and not being able to find anyone to put it in, it makes sense to me to get those windows in and be done with it. The tenant is paying roughly $19,000 a year in rent. He's paying for his own oil. And when we asked him to move it, he asked to move into the house, we agreed to let him move in and he would pay his own utilities. I said at the time, and we should have new windows in before the winter. We know with the price of oil, it would be unfair of us not to put those in if we can. So the Board of Selectmen are asking the Board of Finance to agree to take $7,100 from line item B26.12, which is the North Stonington Ambulance Association, which we renegotiated their contract after the budget was done, and we saved $43,000 there. And that would go into the Hewitt Farm Farmhouse line C3.35, which is a capital line item for the 1750 farmhouse.
I'll make a motion to move $7,100 from line item C 3.35.
No, from B20.
I'm sorry, from B 26.12. From the North Stonington Ambulance Association to C 3.35, 1750 farmhouse. Have a second.
Second.
Any discussion amongst the board members?
Bob, does the version that Christine has here printed for you have the correct information in it? Because we're missing a line item on the. Oh, I see.
I didn't see it either. I had to ask her.
I got you. What was the total? I heard, I got the windows and then the interior trim and the labor. I missed that.
So the windows are 25,991, and for $34,800 was the removal of existing windows, replaced with Anderson Woodwright energy efficient windows, remove all existing exterior trim and interior trim, replace exterior trim and interior trim, prepare all openings with flashing to prevent leaking, including all fasteners, job cleanup.
What was the total?
$34,800.
The total of the two is $60,791. There's currently $53,734.33 in that line item, which is why we need the additional $7,100 to complete the project.
So when we originally budgeted for this item, I guess we were assuming that the price was gonna be around $53,000. And just so we can reiterate for everybody, we went through an RFP, got nothing, went to local townspeople, got one bid, and we're only $7,100 off from what we thought we had to budget.
And considering when we did the RFP a few months ago and with the way things have escalated in town and when no one can do the work, obviously it's a smaller pool of people. Luckily that we have a person from town that will do it, and he's a quality builder. He does a lot of building in the Watch Hill area, and he knows what he's doing. So it's not like we're getting some fly-by-night
Mhm.
builder.
I'm familiar with his work. Does a good job. Sure.
The other thing I want to say is that we've already ordered the windows. We will have the windows. So if we store them over the winter, there is possibility that damage could happen to them as they are just sitting, waiting to be installed. So that's the other reason why it makes more sense to do it now and not wait until the spring.
The other thing in the lease agreement, we had stated that we'd be putting new windows in before winter, and with him paying his own utility bills. I think that would not be fair to the tenant for the kind of money that he's paying the town to live there.
You have a comment, Gary?
Yeah, Bob, you got any contingency or is this it? I mean, if we get into this and 7,100 becomes 10, are you coming back or is there some softness in there?
I did a walkthrough with the builder. He knows what he's up against. He's worked with historic homes before, and I can't imagine to be any additional over. There's
Got
no
it.
contingency. No.
We know where he lives.
Yeah, but. And when he walked through, did he make sure he checked some of the sills and some of the, poke some of the sills and poke some of the stuff? Cause,
All the exterior trim is going to be replaced, Carl, including the sills.
all right, and how about the framing under it?
Yeah.
That would,
If it's rotted, he'll replace it. It's part of the job.
okay.
He's
but it's
gonna, he
in-
has to prepare the opening, so,
Okay, so there shouldn't be any extra after that that we can think of,
correct.
unless the wall falls down when you pull the window out.
Enough out of you, Carl.
Yeah, okay. I'll shut the mic.
Anybody else? I'll move it to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Am I seated?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Everyone's seated, right? Or-
Yes. I seated everyone then.
Wyona, don't look like you're standing.
6-0 passes. All right, on to agenda item 5, fiscal year 24 budget timeline.
So, the speaker is here if you want to take care of that, so we can keep the two fiscal year 24 items together.
Sounds good. Let's go back to line item number 3. You have the floor.
That worked. Great. Thank you guys very much for having me here tonight. I had the opportunity to present this proposal to the Board of Selectmen last week and have been looking forward to making this proposal or presentation to you as well. So I believe that Bob has circulated all of the documents ahead of time. So I'm Beth Kermsey, and I am a resident in town and also a landscape architect with Fuss and O'Neill, and I'm here representing Fuss and O'Neill tonight. So in 2015, Fuss and O'Neill worked on a project for the Wood Pawcatuck River watershed, and they looked at the 18 municipalities that feed into the Wood Pawcatuck River watershed and assessed opportunities for improving flood mitigation throughout those different municipalities. As everybody knows, the bulk of those municipalities exist over the border in Rhode Island, and as such, they have been aggressively seeking funding from Rhode Island sources to implement some of the proposals made in that plan and to carry them further through investigative analysis and design development into construction. And so lonely North Stonington on the Connecticut side, now there is some funding available from the CTD. There's a resilience fund that they have been developing, modeling on the funds that are available through Massachusetts, and then through Rhode Island adopted the same program. And now Connecticut is in the early phases of adopting that program as well. So the exciting thing there is that this is their first foray into it, and it's an opportunity for North Stonington to get ahead of the curve, to take this study that was already done previously, look at it, bring it one step further towards implementation through a planning grant allocation, and to bring our town closer to being ready for the next 2010. The planning grant is a no match opportunity, which is just, it's a golden ticket, right? In terms of grants, it's a no match. It is, so the town does not need to put up any match for this grant. The idea of offering these no match grants from the state is to help the municipalities in Connecticut get ready for national grant applications, which are very well funded to address issues of flood mitigation, sea level rise, increased storm surge, increased rain events, all of the above, the entire package that comes with climate related mitigation efforts. And one of the ways that they're hoping to do that is to offer this no match program so that municipalities are in a better position to develop these projects further and get prepared. Trying to be as concise as possible. I can open it up to questions.
I think you should just continue on with the presentation, and I think we can write it. If you have something that you want to ask, just write it down and save it for afterwards.
Sure. So with the planning board, what I did go through, I have them with me, and I think that they've been distributed to you. It's a series of maps that we produced. So this study begun in 2015, and it was published in 2017. And what you'll find in this is that in the Chinook River and Asconk Brook watersheds, there are a number of pinch points. And by pinch points, I mean there are dams, culverts, and bridges that are not conducive they're preventing adequate flow. So those are places where we would start in the study. We would do a full assessment of those pinch points that have been identified. And so really we're looking at the in the one that was sent out, this is what I was just holding up, is the hydraulic capacity rating. And so that would be, enabling flow. We also looked at the, flooding impact potential, and, the vulnerability rating, the, organism passage, basically whether or not the fish can get back up the river. But the priority rating, is really one of the places where we would want to start. And it's, I know it's hard for people looking at, you have these, electronically or in front of you, but you'll notice that there are a number of, red dots, and those are the high priority locations, that extend up the Chinook. And also, if we just doing a broad brush reevaluation on some of the numbers, the impoundments and the culverts in the area of Ascot as well would now be rated red based on increased rain events. So we would be looking closely at those in this study, to think through how we could mitigate the capacity of the Chinook and the capacity of the Ascot to manage floodwaters, so that we don't end up with a flooded village, but we don't end up with flooding on Route 2. One of the weakest points on Route 2 is right outside the door of this facility where it crosses over, and that culvert there is something that we could address through this, if either depending on how far we want to take the actual study. Of course, I'm only here to ask for funding to write the grant, but depending on how far you want to take the study, which is something that the town would need to meet about before the application was due. So, tomorrow. But depending on how far we want to take it, we would either put modeling into the study, or we would assess physical characteristics and look using some of the modeling that's already been produced. Conducting a study with additional modeling in it will allow us to have a finer grain of information about these different points and allow us to redesign them, which gets you even further towards an implementation. And so I guess as far as implementation goes, that's where the state would, if we went for a track 1 now, so there's a track 1 and a track 2 with the Connecticut Deep Resilience Fund. If you go for a track 1 now, then you're biting off the study and you're coming up with the data that you need to inform this, the redesign. You're coming up with the specific list of action items and some design criteria. You might go all the way to a 60% design in this, or you might go to a 20% design, which is more of a conceptual level plan with some data backing. So that's all about project definition. But if we were to, no matter what we do in this phase, we would be positioning ourselves for a phase 2 application, and a phase 2 application gets you all the way through the draft for federal funding, whether you're going for a BRIC grant, HMGP, or other funding source from the federal level. Your track 2 gets you that far. So I was able to speak with CT Deep on Friday, and they are not sure about the timeline that they'll roll out the program again, but they're looking to accelerate it. The funding that has gone into BRIC and HMGP to implement these projects is tremendous, and it's going to be awarded in the very near, in the near future, in the near future grant speak. So that's not tomorrow. It's good. It's a good deal. Or that's a good thing that it's not tomorrow. So we would be positioned, if we were to apply for the track one now and complete this study, regardless of whether we get to 20, 60, wherever we get to in that, it would put us in a really good position to apply for a track two, which could be available for, the application could be available as soon as the spring. And then a track two would position you for, federal implementation dollars. The, Board of Selectmen asked the other night, you know, what kind of match are we looking at as we move forward for that kind of funding? And it varies, and with every single application layer, it will vary because it's a different organization, or it's, the BRIC is looking for 25% match. There's an HMGP money tends to be disaster, linked to a disaster. So, best case scenario is that we get a giant flood. No. but it's, for example, there's an HMGP allotment available right now, with a 10% match, and there's another one that has a 30% match. So we're not match free all the way through, but taking advantage, and also we don't know that the CT Deep Resilience Fund is going to be match free next time around. They could easily attach a match to it. They've really opened up the doors here because this is a chance for Connecticut to catch up to some of the other states in New England, who have very similar allocations from the federal government, but that launched their programs to address vulnerability earlier than we did. So they opened up the door and said, give us what you have. In fact, the application process is written in a way so that, often a lot of grant applications are very rigid, down to the font that you use and the spacing and, and the et cetera. This one is, tell us what you have, tell us who your team is, and tell us how you're going to get it done. There are real criteria that they're being sticklers about are, you have to have a community engagement process. You can't do this in a vacuum. You have to have that. And you need to demonstrate that you have a vulnerability. So we can demonstrate we have a vulnerability. This flooding issue, not only do you have that 2017 Wood-Pawcatuck River watershed study to point to, which used modeling and data collection, you have that to point to. We have also been listed as having a flood issue in the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments Hazard Mitigation Climate Adaptation Plan. So that is a state recognized document identifying our issue. And it's also been brought up in our municipality's own hazard mitigation plan.
I will digest that a little bit. If I may, I'll start. Right now, we're looking at a proposal for your firm to take over kind of the grant writing process to try to get us in with the state to get this dollars that we don't have to match anything. They're gonna give us funding for planning the projects.
Right.
Okay. And I guess the time, say we say yes to the 71, the money for this, what's the amount? 7,000. How long do you need before we're gonna have a grant in place
So the applications are due on the 10th
of
November.
That was my question. I mean,
Mhm.
are you gonna be using this data that you supplied to us? That's already out there, right? You already know that. You already know where the pinch points are. You know where the problem areas are. You're gonna use that data and basically do the work for us to try to get this grant in the time frame that we're talking about.
Correct.
Okay. And then is that what the 7,000 gets us? And then if there's another grant aspect after that with the federal dollars, is that going to be a whole new contract?
Correct. It would be a different application. So it would be a request to package the project for the next award.
Would that be part, could we use money from the state in this project to contract with a grant writer such as yourselves? I mean, a landscape architect company that slash grant writer that could help us, go to that next step?
Yeah, so that's an integral piece of a track 2 application, is to have a draft application to the feds as a deliverable. In the track 1, it's not a requirement, but it seems to be available that you would, in the way that, so with the track 1,
Before you go on, I do workers' comp and there's all kinds of words specific to workers' comp that no one else understands.
got
So
it.
track 1 means exactly what?
So the grant project or the grant funding is broken into 2 tracks. So a track 2 project is something that's a little bit further along than what you have already. It would be something where you said, we're gonna take this design, we're gonna develop construction documents, we're gonna be shovel ready. And in order to, one of the deliverables required out of that is an application, a draft application to a federal funding agency.
So your track 1 is applying to the state for this particular grant.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, whether they would specifically approve a line item in a track
Yeah,
1
that's a question.
application to write a track 2 application, we could ask them. We could ask them for that. The other thing is that I would expect out of, well, and the deliverable that's required out of a track 1 is a compilation of next steps. They're trying to be as open and welcoming as possible to the track 1s. It's really, it's like a stimulus to get these projects into the pipeline. So is that an application for track 2? It might be. Is it an application out of a track 1 study? You're not going to be ready for a federal grant. Because a federal grant is going to ask for a more developed design. They
Which is
want
what
to know.
This grant from Connecticut is to develop that design. Be able to go to the feds and say, we have this more developed design that's specific. to this."
Correct.
Okay.
So
Does anyone else have any questions before I go on? Gary?
It's the 3 basic questions. What are the elements of the deliverable? Once we identify these pitch points and share them, whether it's track 1, track 2, do we have a duty to act? Do we have to address them, whether there's funding available or not? And the third part is, how does this federal and state funding apply? Like the village is a historic area. The houses aren't registered as historic houses. But originally when the Mashantuckets were doing their thing, the town attorney registered the village as a historic area, and I believe state and federal money can't be used to change the flavor of the village. So we start ripping out culverts and putting in big tubes and assuming the government's gonna pay for it. Does that work or not? I'm done. Oh,
Thank you, Gary, for those questions. That's a really rich question. And it is one that the state is eager to embrace. And I can base that off of my conversations with the group that has been crafting this program. There is going to, one of the things that they're eager to test is the resistance points between what makes sense for resilience and what makes sense for historic preservation. So one of the other applications that I'm working on for this involves looking only at that, looking only at how you deal with historic properties and resources that are in a flood zone. So they're eager to consider that question. I cannot answer right now whether the federal government will fund changes to an historic village. However, they wouldn't have purview over, one of the exciting pieces about this project in my mind is that we just used ARPA funds to take down a building on a lot that was identified in this study as a location that has great potential for green infrastructure. And so green infrastructure is surface level, natural systems for mitigating floodwaters. So, bioswales, bioretention, they can be, as unkempt as, as you might envision a natural rain garden, or they can be as, sculpted as something that you find at Disney. It's just a matter of the plants working in the right way to manage the water. So it doesn't have to be like a jumbled mess. We can use this green infrastructure intervention if the study, and I would imagine that it does, because the Chinook, where we have real estate to make some real changes on the Chinook for floodwater retention, floodwater management, water quality management, habitat improvement, all of these things. It happens in the lot across the street from where we just tore down the building, and the 100-year floodplain extends into that parcel. Could these two parcels, in this initial study in 2017, it was supposed that there would be a possibility to merge these two parcels, not in terms of property lines, because they seem to be two separate parcels, but to transcend those two parcels in the way that you manage floodwaters on it. If you were to introduce green infrastructure on this site, the green infrastructure then becomes the spine or the framework that is eligible for. There are many programs that are focused on implementing green infrastructure, and those programs look for co-benefits in the implementation. And so the project that I described to the Board of Selectmen last week when we met is one in Westerly on Main Street, in which we started with just the simple task of mitigating floodwater with green infrastructure. And as a result, we used the framework of that green infrastructure to demonstrate the necessity for a traffic study. And we used the traffic study to demonstrate the necessity for street improvements, a Renaissance grant for street improvements that changed curb cuts and married the curb cuts to the stormwater mitigation. So now you have a re-choreographed vehicular and pedestrian experience through Main Street that's re-landscaped with plant material that is set in place in a design that is meant to mitigate stormwater. So what started with a little puddle is now becoming a renaissance of sorts for Main Street. And now the town of Westerly is looking to use that study and those design proposals to bury wires. And so what I am saying is that, I mean, we're not going to get to a point where we bury wires over there, but what I'm saying is that it's a catalyst. And that catalytic component of introducing the green infrastructure into the site and flood management gives you a platform from which to launch other improvements that become co-benefits to this green infrastructure implementation.
Any other questions right now?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So technically the grant has any design in it at all, or is it just to write the grant to get to the design? Would be question one.
Sure. The $7,000 is just to write the grant application. Should we be awarded the grant application, I believe that it has to go to a formal RFP. And when it goes to a formal RFP, the firm that is awarded the design work would then bring this study forward.
But,
Okay,
sorry,
So then,
a couple people have asked this and I just want to,
do that and then I'll go back.
sorry, I
Yeah,
just
no,
want
no,
you to
fine.
know, like, so, because I think Gary asked the same thing. So 0.4 on the Fuss and O'Neill proposal bullets out what this includes. So project description, project abstract, project narrative, detailed work plan and schedule for achieving proposed project goals, project location figure, supporting figures demonstrating vulnerabilities to climate change, budget, project budget, and summary of connection to the persist framework. So I think a couple of us have asked like what it is. I just want to make sure we read that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I confirm with Beth is whatever we get from them as part of the grant application will be the documents that we can use to go out to RFP. So we won't then need to figure out what the RFP is to find a company to
If we're
perform
ready
the
for
work.
RFP. All right, the pinch point on Route 2 is on a state road. How would that impact us to fix it if it's a state road? Why are we liable for that?
No, we wouldn't be liable for that. But the study would need, the town would need to prove not prove. So if you were to undertake the study, the hydraulic modeling, that would eventually come, whether it was in track 1 or track 2. The hydraulic modeling would be the basis for the redesign of that. And then it could either be sent, the overall plan that would be developed by the time you're done with the track 2, that's ready for implementation, could be broken up so that you could send appropriate pieces to the correct funding agencies. So, for example, you might go to the feds for a grant to look at changing mitigation on the Chinook, maybe taking out a dam, maybe changing or implementing green infrastructure along the banks where it goes through town property. You might send that to the state, to DOT to
Okay.
fix. And you might, for the green infrastructure, there are a number of organizations that support, so it could be Long Island Sound Futures Fund. We could
Okay.
break this up into smaller.
So we take
pieces.
anything that would be the state's property, we'd have to juggle to them in this
Yeah.
particular, okay. Study focuses on, wait a minute. Let's skip over the retention ponds or retention areas you're talking about, basically are ponds. If nobody's keeping them up, then they do not become retention ponds anymore. So that would become liable for us to take care of. And at the same time, let me just finish. The area you're talking about over here at the school, I believe is 2 to 3 feet higher already than what the end of the village is to begin with. So to get that to be part of your green area, I would think that would have to be dropped considerably to do that. Am I correct?
Yeah, so these are ideas that would need to be fleshed out. They're by no means, and a retention pond, there are so many issues with traditional retention ponds. So it's not, each solution would need to be developed further to meet the circumstances and the unique conditions along the river. In fact, retention ponds don't really attract funding because they're not, they don't do water quality.
Right, but basically what you're describing is a retention pond. You're slowing the water down or holding it before it gets any further.
So it's more of an integrated system. The green infrastructure tends to be more of an integrated system where you're using plant systems as a part of a process.
Mhm.
So it has a different look and feel and a different functional capacity than a traditional stormwater.
Okay. All right, so I guess that would go to the next question on exactly how they think they're gonna prevent flooding, other than making all the streams the same thickness all the way down, taking all the pinch points, reducing all the sides down to a narrow, steady stream.
Carl,
other words-
I mean, let me just interject.
Yeah.
Your questions are valid, but I mean, the question right now is, we don't know.
Well, that's what,
In
I mean, to spend this money right now on something we're not sure of what's gonna go on, where we got other projects going on, is what I'm worried about.
the money's being used to apply for a grant that puts you in a position of saying, all right,
Ready to go to the next step.
go to the next step as to, you know, we already recognize there's certain points. That she's not developing a plan to fix it.
Yep.
She's
Okay.
developing a plan to write a grant
To have somebody.
that
else
the
try and fix
DEP
it.
are now are going to provide money to do those types of studies.
Okay.
You know, and it may not be her firm, it could be
Yeah, could
somebody
somebody
else.
else's, Yeah.
It's a, I think the more question for us as the fiscal board is if we spend the money now and we're successful with the state, what's the next level of us spending on the track 2? You know, what are we gonna get ourselves into by starting this process right now with this particular grant?
I think that's a really valid question. And as a taxpayer in town, you know, I appreciate that you're asking it. So, you know, right now it's no match. In the spring, it could be no match. It could be a bit more match. So it would be, you know, each time that you go for this to implement it, let's say that you're looking for $100,000 next time, just as a round number, and it's a 20% match. Well, then that's a $20,000
Right.
amount that needs to be put
Provided
into.
by us.
Right. So is that something, you know, that the flip side of that is that this would put something on the shelf so that we have a plan that so when the next event happens, and statistically it will happen. When the next event happens, having this plan in place puts us further ahead than other municipalities to be eligible for additional funding. So if there is match this time, there might not be match the next. So, and the match might be very different,
The match right now for this grant is 0.
0.
Carl. I mean, yeah, Carlson, Mr. Carlson. Carl.
Good see. We're having some name troubles tonight, I guess. So, just a couple of things we know, I think I know. We know that, other than Beth, none of us, including me, are an expert in this field. I know not a lot about this. What else do we know? We know that, so weather's gotten more severe, with Hurricane Sandy and the flood in 2010 and things that have happened in the past, and they're projecting things, weather to get more severe, more. So we know that's probably happened. We know that our town is full of waterways, rivers and streams. And historically, we know we've already had a flood. With those things that we know, it almost like we're putting our head in the sand if we say that for $7,000, which is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money, to put us in a position to know more as a town and be smarter than our abutting towns when it comes to this, when the next event happens, whenever that is, could be next year, could be 20 years from now, are we going to be more prepared than we were the last time when an event happened? So I don't think the fact that it's ARPA funding, and I'm not saying we just spend ARPA funding like it's like we're crazy, we just have this money, just keep spending it. But when we have something that this comes in front of us, I think we'd be crazy not to at least say yes, that for $7,000 and with this first grant being a 0 match, why wouldn't we do this? Now, I asked 6 different groups to give us letters of support. I've got 4 back and 2 commitments. So we've got letters of support for us if we go forward with this tonight from Heather Summers, Greg Howard, the Wheel Library, and the COG, the Council of Governments. Committed to sending us letters is Joe Courtney's office and Avalonia have all committed. So we would have 6 letters of support that you have 4 copies already, that we would be able to go to the table and say to the state, we have these people that are supporting us in this effort because we are within their governance. And if you could read these letters saying this is important to us, that this town of North Stonehenge is a beautiful town. And the thing that makes it beautiful is the rivers and streams and lakes, but it's also one of the things that makes it the most dangerous and more apt to have something come down the road later. In 2010, we had a lot of expenses by both residents and we know the building fell into the river. The bridge was out for 2 or 3 years. People up and down Main Street had dumpsters. Question, Beth, is Kingswood and Meadowwood included in this? Because that was a question that was asked.
Kingswood and Meadowwood would be included in this, because we would be looking out through the Assaconk as well. So it's this side of town, the Chinook and
The south side of Route 2, basically.
and the north side.
Right.
So going up.
But
to-
Kingswood is on the south side.
Right,
and
so it.
That's
it-
on the Assaconk Swamp side.
yeah,
And one other
so-
question that was asked before you got here by somebody online that said, does this going to mean that we're going to have to put sewers in? I don't want to pay for sewers. It's going to mean water. Tell us how this works. Is sewers or water have anything to do with this at this point? Or should it?
Only if you want to look at that. But really, to look at flood mitigation on the Chinook, we wouldn't have to look at sewers. If you had a number of, there are towns where they went for resilience funding because there was an allocation after Sandy that was applied to Fairfield County and, the western part of the state. And so the state has gone through some planning associated with Resilient Connecticut 1.0. Now we're in Resilient Connecticut 2.0, and it's come to include the entire state.
Well,
But
the reason I asked that, Beth, is the sewers has been a hot topic in this town for a number of
Yes.
years, for and against. And I don't want anyone to perceive this as a veiled attempt by the administrator in town to say, this is the way we can kind of sneak sewers into the situation.
no, it is, so there were situations, I believe that one of the first neighborhoods that had this come up was in Stratford, where they were looking at storm surge into a neighborhood that had septic. And the problem was that the septics were all going to fail. They were all within the flood zone. And it was a no-brainer for that municipality to use the planning to develop a plan for a septic. For a sewer system, so that they could maintain, the health and safety of that neighborhood. Here, we're looking at a watershed that floods roads, floods bridges, Route 2 or the village. We're not looking at septic overflow as a primary concern.
Thank you.
Sure.
So speaking from a strictly financial perspective, the Board of Selectmen at their last meeting has figured out a way to close out projects for ARPA funds that are completed. So for example, they closed out the expenses for 298 Norwich Wesley Road because that was a fiscal year 22 expenses. So they put back into ARPA $21,482.67. So now the amount of money that we're talking about for ARPA is $50,120.70 that is not allocated for current projects. So that's the pool of funds that we're looking at to take this $7,000.
Christine, I didn't see a form.
There was no form.
Okay.
It's not a transfer, it's just allocating it from ARPA. The transfer form is just for the general fund.
We had a form for the stuff that we were approving for ARPA too, but maybe I'm
It's
imagining.
just a memo.
Okay.
But since we had the full proposal, we didn't.
And
I
the grant you get finished right now, how long can that sit on the shelf? Is there a timeline where it runs out and you have to start over again? I guess would be the question.
Yes, I think you have to spend the funding within 18 months. So
After you write the grant or when you get the grant?
Awarded it.
When you're
when
awarded
you're
the grant?
awarded the
Okay.
grant,
Yep.
then you
Yeah,
have
I
to do
think
the
we already went
study
over that.
within, but that's where you have the money and it's available on a reimbursement basis, but the state has indicated that they would come up with and work with municipalities to bridge that gap. Possibly with, if the municipality wasn't interested in doing the reimbursement on a reimbursement basis.
I guess then the question would be, if you don't mind, is if we do not get the grant after you write it, and we go for the grant again, does it cost us more money at the time?
That's a great question. We would definitely want to revise or, update it. And I would imagine there would be a
Okay.
small fee to update or revise if they found error with our application.
Thank you.
I guess just a procedural question. Is this something that your firm brought to the board and said, hey, this is the grant that's out here? And maybe you guys should consider it? Is it something that you guys learned of that we then, did we have to put out the RFP for just this process or I don't want to just run afoul of any kind of
So,
procedural stuff.
the COG has sent out a lot of mailers to me in the last month on this. There's been talked about it at the council of government meetings. Then Beth did reach out to me and say, have you seen this? I said, yes, except I don't know where I would stop. She says, well, if you wanted to, we could talk to you about possibly writing a grant for you since they're experts in this field. I brought it to the Board of Selectmen and said, what do you think? And that's where we started the discussion. So it's a combination of, yes, Beth brought it to my attention that she had the ability to do it, but at the same token, it's mailers I had received before our discussion.
Okay.
But I'll be honest with you, Mike, it wasn't something I was going to dive into because I didn't know where to begin with it. It's not something I know a lot about. We get grant all the time. We get people asking us to apply for grants. It's amazing how many grants are out there, and that's why we do have a grant writer. But when something like this that needs this kind of expertise, I felt it would be better to work with someone that knows and has done work in the past. So I hope that answers
I'm
it.
not trying to take food off your plate, Beth. Just make sure that we're not running afoul of any kind of procedural thing where we have to put, we want to do this and now, hey, let's put it out to all the grant writers out there to make sure we get the best price.
I can tell you, I am writing a lot of these. Our firm is writing a lot of these. And if I didn't live here, it would be a different story, right? Because November 10th is right around the corner. And I feel very strongly about, North Stonington and improving North Stonington. And just, I see this as a huge opportunity.
Agreed.
So
Yeah,
that-
I
that's why
understand
I'm-
we're under the gun time
Right,
wise. The
so-
10th is right around the corner. It's not
Right.
something, I just wanted to be out there that, there'd be reasons why you don't go out there looking for other bids. Is this price that, we have, is it comparable to, other municipalities that you're working with? If you can divulge that information?
Remember, it's recorded.
yeah, I don't think I can say that.
It's professional services and our official threshold for having to go out for an RFP is $20,000.
That's all I had to say.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Christine. You're about 5 minutes late.
I have a question for someone in the room who might know the answer to this. When we lost the bridge, what did that end up costing us? And I do not want a dollar, like down to a dollar number. I'm rough order of magnitude. It's fine. Was it like 5 million, 10 million? Like, does anybody know?
I don't know the answer.
Yeah, Gary, that would be your department, right?
How much did it cost us to replace Boom Bridge?
I have no idea, but while
Main
I'm
Street.
thrilled the bridge is back. The style of the bridge was far different from the bridge that washed out, and that disappointed most of the people in the village. And that's the concern you hear in my voice when I ask specific questions about changing the culverts to allow the flow and what's going to be the outcome of it. Because once that architecture is gone, it's not going to come back when you apply modern standards to it. So I would
It didn't
advise
in the
we
first place.
move carefully.
Well, so that's my concern, right? That so we're a small town. Our undesignated fund, while a lot of people in town think it's huge, it's not compared to what an emergency would be. Like an emergency in our town is not going to be commensurate to the size of our town. It's going to be an emergency that costs what it costs. So if this is a study that can help us get ahead of what some of those emergencies might be and be able to identify them, even if we don't prevent them, having some of that legwork already done. I mean, I think and I appreciate your concern, Gary, but the bridge was gone, right? So like that could happen again, right? So regardless of what we'd prefer the architecture to be, if we don't have it, we don't have it. And that's the problem that we're faced with.
Just one last, just to reiterate, right now, doing this grant, if we get it, we have a further study that's more boots on the ground for what we could do to mitigate and prepares us for track 2, which is federal dollars that you believe are coming down the pipe that we can then, no guarantees on matches or what have you, but you've heard through your contacts that there are going to be federal dollars to actually implement these plans in the future because it's that likely to happen. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and there's no guarantee that we get the grant after writing the application. But if we do get the grant, it puts us that much closer to being able to apply for those federal dollars.
Selectman Mastriani, you are recognized.
Sure.
Can you come?
One question that I didn't ask at our meeting that made me think of, as you were talking about the different tracks, is there a way to, in this grant application, have it written well enough for us to be able to get enough grant money to make it track 2 detailed enough? So then we are good enough, and that would be 100% match.
Well, 0 match. Yeah. 0 match, right? Yes, yeah, there is, definitely. Eh, I will leave that with the selectmen because that's you know, if we do hire us, that would be the intent of our first meeting, which I believe is scheduled for Friday.
Wait a
I'm just
minute.
joking.
I don't think so.
Can I schedule that? No, we would need to meet very soon about that, and we would need to put parameters on this project and what we'd want to achieve out of this. Because I'm sure all of you are familiar with plenty of grants out there that have enormous match requirements, and this just seems like a really good opportunity for us to think about how far you go.
I was with many of my abutting first selectmen over the past couple of days, and not one of them was going for this grant because I don't think they had the time to do it on the 10th, and they didn't have the ability to get these grants written.
So going back and looking at old town meeting minutes, it was about 1.5 million for the Main Street Bridge.
Thank you.
You just confused me a little bit. If you guys decide, hey, we want to go for the Gusto, is that more than $7,000 now?
No, that's the same. It's
So-
7,000 to write the grant.
Okay.
Application, to write the application. And then the study would be whatever whatever we're awarded, that's the study.
Got it.
Whatever the town is awarded.
Whatever we can get from the state, we can get the
Right.
most, we want the best product. from the
And
state we
you
can
might
get.
ask for X and the state might come back and say, we're gonna give you Y. We think that this project needs this to get as, further ahead. And that's as far as they're gonna go. But there's the difference between limiting yourself and allowing them to set the limit.
Right.
I
That's a,
highly
that's, a-
recommend.
that's, a- yeah, that's a
going after-
conversation for another day.
Right, exactly.
If we have other ARPA funds and,
Right,
all right,
it's a strategy.
any further discussion on this? I'll entertain a motion to approve the use of $7,000 from the ARPA funds for Betts Firm plus and O'Neill to write the Connecticut DEP Resiliency Program grant.
You're entertaining a motion?
I'm
or you're
entertaining a
making it?
motion for that, yes.
So you're not making
I'm not making it. I'll make it.
it. I just wanted, I just
said it
needed to
all.
know what my response was, Mike, that's all.
So I'm moving that forward.
I'll second it.
Second, Sarah. Any further discussion?
So I still didn't hear whether we have a duty to act once these are identified and
She said-
submitted.
She did say no.
No, you don't have a duty to act.
Okay.
So I was made aware of a other grant that you had applied for that required that you implement it, and there's no implementation tied to this.
Are you satisfied with that, Gary? Do you have other questions?
Yeah, I'm good.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye,
Aye.
Aye.
it's three. And we have nays. We have three nays. Motion does not carry.
Because we need 4. Is that why? Oh, Gary was in there. So it was 3-3. I got it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Beth.
We're on to agenda item 5. Fiscal year 24 budget timeline. Yes, please, go ahead.
So we put together, I put together a draft of the budget timeline for this year. The selectmen reviewed it at their last meeting. And only feedback was whether groups should be presenting to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance at the same time, since it might not be the same budget that's presented to the Board of Finance when the selectmen have their review. I included in the December timeframe for this discussion of process and timeline by both the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen in December. I don't know if that's necessary in the schedule since we're having these discussions now. I think it's important to have the process solidified as far as what you're asking for from the departments, commissions, boards in November, so that the ask can go out in December, so they can return everything in January. We don't need to finalize this today. This can be your first review of the schedule, and it can be finalized at your next meeting in 2 weeks, whatever you would like to do. The items of note that I will point out are the annual town meeting by statute, by ordinance, shall be the first Monday in May. So that would be Monday, May 1st. And then the budget referendum would follow 2 weeks after that. So we would have the public hearing on Monday, April 17th. The week before that is the public school break. So we don't have a conflict, and we're able to push that a week further than it was last year. This has the first presentation by the Board of Ed to the Board of Finance as March 15th. So it tries to give them as much time as possible to get their numbers in and find out about any retirements or anything that's going to drastically impact their budget. So we can just keep this as an agenda item for the next week, or if you guys have feedback, comment, and want to discuss now, completely up to you.
I think we'll have a chance to review this and with the other members of the board not present right now. Let's just have, hopefully we'll have a full seating of members and alternates at the next meeting. I really haven't had a chance to digest it. It looks, I mean, at first blush, it looks good, but let's just, we're not going to vote on it tonight. Thank you. On to agenda item. Does anyone have any questions for that timeline while we're on it, or? On to the fiscal year 24 budget request template.
So in the documents that went out for this meeting, I sent the form that Sarah made for last year so it's still labeled as budget summary 2022, 2023. And I also included what I need as far as line item names, numbers, and requests. So either if there's a way to incorporate the two documents as one document, or if we need to have two separate documents, one with more of a narrative from all of the departments that's more beneficial for the Board of Finance, and then the numerical values for what I need to put together for the spreadsheet. This is just so you all can start looking at the template so we can have it ready for December for distribution.
So there's two files. One is just the cover sheet and the second one is the cover sheet plus the line items, correct?
Yes, so the cover sheet is just, is the cover sheet that went, and then the template was what I sent out to everyone, so they had to do both tabs on it. That was how it was distributed to the board last year.
Okay, but the first page on both are the same, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was confused for a second.
Christine,
Are you muted?
Oh,
Gary, who do you want to know if they're muted?
Christine, she's showing up as muted on the screen.
oh, that's just my laptop. I'm on the regular one, but my laptop is sharing.
So put the little red mic closer to your mouth. That'll work. Because I could barely hear you. I don't know if you could hear her, Winona.
I struggled to hear everyone in that room, but
Christine, is it possible to add a column for actuals? So like what was actually spent?
So in the budget that gets distributed to you when I put everything together, it has their actuals for last year after the audit.
Okay.
So we can ask them for it, but they may not know.
You layer it in. You layer it in later.
Yes. Yep. I
Okay.
add that all. in. And
So
I'm
you-
gonna add the column that we had for one of the versions that has the percentage change from current budget to request.
That's based on the requested budget. Okay. Okay, so this is what you ask of them. What you give us will also have the actuals and the percent change.
Yes. So everything gets, I take all those individual spreadsheets and compile everything into one master sheet that has we have to, by state statute, we have to include the actuals from the audited actuals from prior year, the approved budget from current year, and the request for the next year.
Okay, thank you.
What about, and maybe we're gonna get to it or not, what about detail where the town funding, when applied for, how it was allocated or utilized?
So
Gary, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so at the last meeting I discussed, what I'd like to see is for the town, for the functions that come in and ask for funding from the Board of Finance of the town, how those specific requests are utilized. So for instance, the ambulance association gets X, the fire department gets Y, the library gets Z. So, and we granted a certain amount to each one of these functions last year. How it gets actually utilized. So we got into that long discussion with many of the groups last year about our money versus their money and what we could see and what we can't. I believe it's certainly within our rights to ask the money that was provided last year, how is it specifically utilized? And the reason I'm asking the question is, if it's utilized to balance the budget because these functions are having difficulties operating, I'd like to know that. If it's utilized to enhance services or do some sort of capital improvements, I'd like to know that too, because they're very different needs for money. You follow?
I follow, but I think that would just need to be an ask, that would need to be an item in the summary sheet that you guys come up with that I send out.
Okay, that's what I needed to know, whether we were gonna put it in this or whether we're gonna put it in that, in the other, because we did the other last year and very few, if any, actually utilized it.
Everyone completed it. They may not have included information that you were looking for, but they did complete them.
Yeah. So I think that message needs to be Ford communicated better this year that the expectation is gonna be, we want to see. Unless the Board of Finance and others' opinions are welcome here. If we don't need to see that, I'm okay. Personally, I'd like to see it.
We asked for the strategic initiatives in the cover sheet. So if they don't fill it out, we can ask it when we speak to them. I mean,
I think it's a question of interpretation of what a strategic initiative is.
I
So-
also think we need
Do you want me to rename it?
simplify- We need to simplify the language. The people that are filling out these forms may be volunteer chairs of commissions or volunteer members of fire company and the ambulance association. So they may not be as familiar with certain terminology that may be used on the corporate side.
that was a lot of words to just say, stop being so.
Verbose.
fancy. I'd be happy to simplify it. Carrie, any terminology you'd like to substitute, let me know.
I mean, Christine, we have an annual report that comes out. And that's the timeline on that coming out is when?
I've received about 65% of them. The deadline has passed, so my reminder emails will be going out. So you should have that. You will have that before we get into the budget process.
Right, and from that, departments talk about what they did last year.
Correct.
And progress that was made. For instance, land use will say, we had X amount of building permits and whatever. So in a sense, Gary, that does give us and there's some departments that do it better than others. And this was my comment last year was, why doesn't everybody do it like land use does? Because land use does a very thorough explanation of what exactly they did in the year prior. That's a little different than, I mean, are they supposed to copy that same information on this sheet for us when they have an ask for next year versus, we're looking at that and then looking at this in a short form and give us a quick overview of your initiatives that you're looking forward to doing next year. That's what we're asking here, pretty much, right? Plus whatever you're looking for and any budget changes that you see are significant and why. Gary, I think your point's well taken, but there's certain things that should have that information for us. And if we want a better job done by every single department, I thought we made that known last year and we can accept or reject their submission. Is that correct?
For the annual report or for the budget?
Annual report.
Yes, but it's usually already put together at that point.
Mm.
We can always go back and ask for more detail, yes.
I don't think the annual report actually. So there's let's take it.
You want them to open their books for you? I mean, is it,
No. Let's take a specific example. So we augment one of the incorporated functions in the town, X amount of dollars a year. Let's say the fire department. So let's just use numbers. I'm going to throw them out. I have no idea what we gave last year, or what we provided last year. But they say we gave them $60,000. Where did the $60,000 actually get allocated? Did it go to fuel? Did it go to maintenance? Did it go to landscaping? Did we buy new flags? Because the flavor of what the need is gives us a better indication whether this function is underfunded or whether they're using it to do capital improvements. This process should be about expense, meaning what does it take for the groups to run day-to-day 365? if it's a capital improvement, that should be captured that way. And that's what I think you're trying to reference when you say strategic initiatives. Right?
Christine's gonna comment on that, and then Sarah.
So, for example, the fire company, they give a very detailed multi-tab spreadsheet of all of their operating costs, what goes to truck tires, what goes to maintenance, and they do have separate capital accounts for their turnout gear. We move their hoses into their operating just because the amount, but they do have individual capital accounts for certain items, and they tell how much goes for officer stipends, how much the chief gets, how much the assistant chief gets. They are very, very detailed on how their money gets allocated.
I get it, but the 60,000 or 100, whatever we gave, does that just get dropped into the general fund and then spread as they see fit? Or were there targeted uses when they made the ask? That's what I'm asking.
That's what I'm saying is they have very targeted uses. They ask for, say, $130,000, and they tell us to the penny where each of that is allocated.
Okay, so if there's consistency and all the functions provide that, I'm good. Meaning ambulance, the park and rec, the cemetery commission, the library, right?
We do get that from all the town departments. We do get that from the ambulance. We don't get that from the library. We don't get that from the neighborhood center. It just depends. And so I think we need we get on in the letter of ask that we get from the nonprofits, they say we have X number of residents from your town that utilize our services. It should cost this amount. These are the types of services that we provide. So I don't know how much more in depth you want from those groups, and we can continue to ask to whatever granular level that you guys want, so that you have the information. We just want to make sure that we provide everything and ask for it in a giving people enough time to get it back to us.
Sarah, you've been trying to speak. What's up?
I don't know anymore.
I love your honesty.
I think, so I created a cover sheet, Gary, so I called it strategic initiatives. I realize now, it seems very obvious that that's not a great way to frame it, especially if you're in a particular, it's just doing sort of day-to-day stuff. The goal was to kind of have a summary here, so we can rename that just sort of indicates what the primary use of the money or anything important is. What I was trying to do when I created this was to get ahead of what I had watched in the previous year happen, which was huge cuts to the bone where people were then saying, well, you cut this, and so I couldn't do X, right? So I was trying to surface, like, what's your most important thing? Let's make sure those things are funded, before we go into detailed conversation.
Mhm.
So that's the intent of this. I don't know if that helps you. I'm not sure what else.
No, that frames it well. So now we understand, what's, I don't want to use the wrong term. What's most important to the functions? Yep. So are you saying is there any other template that will go out beyond this where we can make the ask that I referenced, or is that?
So if you look at, I don't know if you're looking at the right ones. If you look at the attachments that,
I'm looking at the screen that's in front of me right now.
yeah, so Christine, Christine has the wrong one open. So the one that Christine shared, which is a duplicate of the cover sheet, adds a second tab,
Mhm.
and that has the line items that we're asking them to complete. Line item number, line item name, what the budget was approved. That is what's going to Christine. When Christine gets that, this was the question I asked her earlier.
Where is that? Where is that again?
So in the attachments, it's called 2022-2023 budget request form.
I have that.
Mhm.
You look at the tab,
Oh,
budget request.
got it.
Those are the columns that Christine is asking the boards to provide her and the Board of Selectmen. When we get it, she layers in what their actual spend was and what the percent change is. So we will get 2 additional columns.
We only have one line right now, right?
Correct, because there's no budget in it. These these are the columns.
I only see one, but in ours, but
Can you repeat what 2 columns Christine is adding to this spreadsheet?
The actuals spent in the year prior based on the audit, and then the percent change from the budget, original budget asked from the year prior to the new budget ask.
Okay,
So
thank you.
basically, what
Yeah.
the document will look like as we're working on it is what the current budget looks like, the published official budget, plus a column that has the percentage change.
Yeah, so this is fine, you know, to me, and I'm trying to be respectful. It tells us, what did they spend last year? What was left over or what was overspent? And what are they asking for this year? What I'm looking for is, from what we provided last year, where did it actually go? So there are functions like the neighborhood center, the library, others that aren't necessarily town functions, that just get a portion of budget augmentation. And I think it's important to know what's driving that request. Are they having difficulty keeping the lights on and making ends meet? Or are they using it to enhance service or improve the environment? I think it's important to know that.
well, we're presented by the library board every year, where they ask us for a certain amount of money for operating expenses, because every year they're dipping into their endowment to make up, say their operating budget's $100,000 and we give them 50. They may have some other cookie sales that provide another $500, and then they have to use their endowment to match the rest of the budget. That's the same presentation I've seen for 4 years. I don't know if the neighborhood center has ever had to come do that to us, but I'm assuming that their operating budget is more than what we give them. And you can decide to say, I don't want to give you any money or not.
All right.
You know, do I
I'm
need to
good.
know whether or not they're using it for children's books or some type of woke material? No, I don't need to know that. Is that the kind of detail you want?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, are they doing it for a flood study, or are they doing it because they need to pay the staff? It's a different message that I'm trying to figure out. Are these functions having difficulty meeting their operating expenses, or are they trying to figure out how to improve their environments? Because it's a different level of spending. When hard days come, that level of visibility is important. Because, you know, if we as a group make a decision not to give full funding to an entity, and they therefore have to reduce their services to the town, that's a very different story than they have to put off an enhancement. I mean, right now we got ARPA funding seems to be capturing any shortfalls the town has. Those days will end at some point, and I want to be prepared to be able to make those hard decisions.
I feel like we're going around in circles a little bit. The only way I see that working, Gary, is if we build into the schedule an opportunity to review the budget and reject it and ask them to provide more detail before we actually meet with them. So I don't know if we could do that, but and I don't even know if the rest of the board would like to do that, but I understand what you're asking. We can't predict if they're going to give us that. Christine can be as clear as she possibly can and say, this is the kind of information we want, but we get what we get. So if we're all concerned about that, then let's decide whether we want to build a step into the schedule that will allow us to push back on the budget submitted and ask for more detail before the presentation or something to that effect. Cause I don't know that us debating it here is going to get us any closer to where we need to be now.
So I believe we had this discussion at the last meeting, and I thought or felt that we had that consensus, but I could be wrong.
I pulled up, on the SharePoint site, we have last year's budget request. So I pulled up one of the social services agencies just to look at what their letter was. So for example, the Arc of Eastern Connecticut sends materials for how their funds have been used, like a regular generic pamphlet, but they also, so the highlights of this letter, I will not read the whole thing to you, is we're asking for $1,500. We help this number of people. Attached materials include the description of our services and who they benefit, our current budget for the community life and advocacy program, and their brochure. And then they have a breakdown that they have the number of staff employed by the entire agency. It cost them over $17 million. And then says about how the other municipalities supporting the agencies are Waterford, and that they give them $1,800. Old Lyme gives them $850. So, you know, the United Way of Southeastern Connecticut funds them $48,000, and how much percentage of the program that is. So I think a lot of these people are already giving you the kind of information that you're looking for. And we do share all of the information with the Board of Finance through the SharePoint, everything that's come in from all of the different groups, whether it's, you know, the colorful materials that we've scanned in and the actual letters asking for the amount of funds. So I just think it's all here. If you want it in a more summarized format, then we can try to get that from them. But I think all the information is being provided by all of the groups.
Where does everyone find SharePoint? Just to.
I emailed you guys a link last year to where the documents were, because it's on a password protected.
Can you do that one more time for us?
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, having done this for 4 years, the process generally is that all these groups submit their proposals, you know, through this process. They go before the Board of Selectmen to make their pitches. Some of the major groups that need the money, like the fire department, the library, planning and zoning, will come and do a joint presentation to both of us, because it's so much information that we have, that it would be a waste of time to do it twice. And you know, though the questions that you have, Gary, are certainly valid, and I think that they've been asked many times during those sessions. You know, I don't know if you have a proposed way of on this particular sheet, you know, that you want to know how much was used for administrative work, how much was used for cleaning supplies, how much was used for, you know, not necessarily not all the line items, but major line items that you think that would be easily filled in by these people. You know, I'm willing to listen to it. I just think that, you know,
It's very simple and simple words. How was the money provided last year by the town utilized? You know, there's no fancy wording in that. I just want them to know that the question, I'll ask the question. It doesn't have to be on a template. I'll raise my hand and ask the question. And I think it would be disingenuous to not send the message that somebody's going to ask that question. So
and we can
be
have something
prepared.
on there that says you will be asked
Yeah,
by either the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance or both, how your money last year was utilized.
perfect. I'm good.
We add that? Well,
Because I did ask it
let's get
last
this
year.
finalized for next week when we have Paul and Dan here, but that's a proposal on there, is on the ask. Be prepared to present to the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance or both together how you utilized the funds given to you last year.
But what happens for all of the departments and groups that don't present? You're only seeing presentations from 6 to 8 of 30 some odd.
Well,
I'm really only, personally, I'm only worried about the heavy hitters, which are the ones that present.
Okay.
Well, and I would expect the Board of Selectmen will be speaking. Like between the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed, they're speaking to everything, so if we have questions, they'll answer them.
Yeah, and he's got, I mean, just from experience, the Board of Selectmen are trying to present a budget that's palatable. And they're asking these questions, you know, to the nth degree. And then we're actually then, you know, beating them up even more. So I think, you know, if those questions aren't being asked by those guys, I'd be very surprised.
I'm just confused because we've watched so many presentations where they tell us exactly what they use the money for, so. I mean, I'll change the wording on the template, Gary, so it says that, but
Well, it's just, that's a proposal for us to, we're gonna have
Sure.
this discussion on the budget and the request template as an agenda item for next meeting. Any further discussion on this matter at this point? All right, review of the minutes. I know it's late, everybody, but let's just get the minutes done so we're not doing it next week. Yeah, the minutes from August. Let's just stay with August first, with the August 17th meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from August as drafted.
Have a second.
Second,
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Winona, is that an aye for you too?
yes.
Okay. I'm just gonna abstain because I wasn't there. I was on vacation that week, so. Sarah, you voting yes?
I was not there for that meeting.
All right, so we have 4-0-2. Those minutes are approved. On to the October minutes. Just give a quick review, everyone. We had two meetings in October, right, everyone? We had two meetings in October.
Correct.
Yes.
This is
October
the,
5th
this is
and
the
October
first
19th.
one where we discussed the short-term loan repayment.
I make a motion.
This had to be the second one. I think the first one was 9/19.
Okay.
Sorry, 10/19.
No, we did, that was August.
So. So we approve the steep grant.
Yeah, because we didn't move on that one at that time.
We're talking about the October 5th meetings.
We are.
Minutes, correct? Okay.
Yes.
I make a motion to approve them as written.
Second.
Any further?
No.
Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 6-0. Now we have October 19th. I'll move to approve those as written.
Second.
That's Mike and Gary. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions?
I abstain. I was not present.
Okay. 501. That's it, right? On to public comments. Nicole, you're recognizing public comments.
Nicole Porter, 44 Pinecrest Road. Not to, under no circumstances should this reopen the conversation about what we're putting on the form for the budgets. But I do have possibly a suggestion, Gary. For the better part of several months now, I've tried to grasp what it is that you're looking for. And I think tonight it finally hit me. If you are wanting, say we've given the library $60,000 and then they are operating the rest of their budget with what they have. You need to ask them well in advance when it's given to put that $60,000 in almost a separate budget, separate bucket. And then throughout the course of the year, itemize what they're spending that $60,000 on. And I think that will help them come to you during budget season and ask for the next round and to explain to you what they've spent it on. But for many of those organizations or nonprofits, that 60,000 probably gets dumped into their large pool and they run their operations with it. So just a suggestion that if you want that for either this year, it might be too late to get that itemized account of that $60,000, but you can certainly ask it now for next year when they come. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a hand online? Brett, go ahead.
Brett, go ahead.
Hi, sorry I had to run out of there to get home for something, but I just want to say it's disappointing that you guys voted not to move forward with that ARPA expenditure. I know how it is to be on the Board of Finance, but I also on the selectman level know that as being the Board of Selectmen being the chief elected officials in town, we look at a lot of different things that are coming in front of us. And unfortunately, the state did give us a limited amount of time on this one. So that's why the rush. Unfortunately, we don't have another pool to go out of. But I think that by voting no tonight or not affirming, we're not being forward thinking in the money that we can get from the state to move projects forward with a short amount of money coming out of North Stonington taxpayers' wallets. And I think some of those things need to be looked at in how we process those moving forward, especially when we're looking to get thousands of dollars that are now going to go to another municipality instead of North Stonington, because we didn't want to spend a little dollars on the front part to benefit and be forward thinking of solving problems for our town. So it's very disappointing when all three selectmen move something like this forward to not pass through Board of Finance, especially when it's through ARPA funding and not coming from the taxpayers' wallets. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Gary, you want to comment, or are you coming as a public?
I just, I feel compelled not to rebut, but to speak from my personal vote on that topic. And I feel had we had time to be better grounded on exactly the sense of urgency, the deliverables, and what it set us on a trajectory for, I may have voted differently. So while I recognize the disappointment in Selectman Mastriani's opinion, it's always better to give us enough time to fully understand and contemplate what's being proposed, rather than say, we need to do this now, trust us, it's the right thing to do. Or not that anybody said that, but that's how it felt to me. I'm good.
I don't think we need to go around the table and decide how we feel about this. Any other further comments online? Seeing none in the audience, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Bye.
Any opposed?